I want to welcome everybody back to the Eye on Piscataway show. This is March 2023, and we're very fortunate enough to have a couple local authors that are going to be on studio here for this show. And the first author that we have is a Piscataway resident, Amulya Veldanda. And Amulya Veldanda has been living here in Piscataway for about 5 years. She's a Rutgers graduate. She had her master's here and decided to stay in the Piscataway community. And she wrote 3 children's books and talking about the books. And Amulya, why do you want to talk a little bit about your books? And how, as you as a scientist in the tech field, isn't that kind of unusual that you go? It's out of the norm there to write a children's book.
Yeah. So I've always been interested in reading and writing ever since I was young. But when I got into high school, I got more interested in the math and science side. So when it was time to choose a major, I decided biomedical engineering. But that passion for reading and writing never died. So about a few years ago, I decided I'm going to try to publish my own books. And to address your question, I actually think there's a lot of similarities between the science side and the writing side. You need creativity. I work in R&D, so I need to come up with creative solutions to some of the problems we're facing. Similar to writing a story, you need to, be able to come up with creative story ideas that will capture your audience's attention. You also, you need to have, you need to be very attentive to detail as a scientist, also as a writer. So I think there are a lot of similarities between being a writer and a scientist. And I use some of these skills in both areas. But yes, as you said, I'm the author of 3 books. Cosmo Faces the Forest of Fear, Cosmo Leads in the Land of Fire and Ice, and We Are Important.
So I want to talk a little bit about this one. This book reminds me of the one of my labs that I have, Duncan, who's very rambunctious and sort of like Cosmo here. Yeah. So in two of the 3 books that you've published, basically the dog goes away on vacation with the family. Yes. And you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So the book is based off of my own golden retriever, Cosmo. The first book.
So there is a real dog, Cosmo.
Yes, he's going to be 11 this year. Okay. He's in all my promotional pictures. But yeah, so the first book, the theme is courage. And I actually used to be terrified of dogs as a child. I would be scared to go trick-or-treating also because I knew dogs would come running to the door. Just downright terrified. But when I was 17 years old, I decided I wanted to face my fear. So we actually got Cosmo as a puppy.
Now that is interesting.
Yes. And at first, I was a little nervous still because puppies, especially golden puppies, they're very rambunctious. They like to eat everything. But, soon he became my best friend. And today I just love dogs. You can tell all of my books have some dog.
Well, so this book that Cosmo basically sort of takes on, I guess, a bobcat.
Yes.
A bobcat, and saves the daughter. Yeah. Because the daughter was lost in the woods. After everybody was enjoying a day out in the woods, it became nighttime, and the bobcat comes out, and then the bobcat is captured by a game warden. Yeah. Eventually. Yes. So, but as you can see, from what I understand from Amulya, that the book is really geared towards ages from 3 to 9 years old, because a lot of the illustrations and the how the verbiage, the wording goes in there, and it's kind of funny. I could picture my own two male labs taking on a bobcat. I say so. It's not unrealistic.
Yeah, they're very loyal dogs. Also, they're very protective.
And then in the back, at the very end, you actually have a questionnaire.
Yep, they're just
at the end of the story, quizzing the children when they read the book.
Just to initiate discussion about fear and courage.
Yeah. Now, is this meant so if to say a teacher gives a homework assignment, the copy back for them to have do a composition on it, what they learned about it. Okay.
Yeah, or just have a classroom discussion about some of the questions. There's also an activity where the kids can go through and find all the treats hidden.
All the treats
in the story. Yeah.
Oh,
the younger kids really enjoy that.
Yeah, because I noticed that there's a very large bone here that I think Cosmo wanted to get that the bobcat was looking at. So your other book here, Cosmo must have had frequent flyer miles because Cosmo goes to, I believe, Iceland, or was it Greenland?
Iceland.
Iceland. So did he go on Iceland Airlines?
We did. Cosmo unfortunately didn't come on that trip.
Oh, so you wrote this because you actually went to Iceland.
Yeah, my husband and I went to Iceland, and we just imagined it would be fun if we could ever take Cosmo.
So did your husband actually get lost by the glaciers? And,
he didn't, no.
Okay. And the waterfalls. So you basically was taken off of a lot of the scenery that you saw while touring, while you were in Iceland over there. And you just plugged Cosmo into the equation.
Yes.
That he jumped in the water and actually saved the day because the owner of Cosmo was lost.
Yes.
They went out on a little trip in the morning after they had coffee, and they somehow couldn't figure out how to get back to the lodge.
Yes.
And they eventually made it back to the lodge. They met a white fox, I believe, on the way.
Yes. Yep.
And the white fox taught them the ways of how to be brave up in Iceland.
Yes.
And you have to adapt.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a lot it says about life, that you have to adapt a lot.
Yeah, so I'm trying to include some sort of message for the kids in every book. So the first one is courage. The second book is about adapting to changing situations. So I'm hoping to include something like that in every Cosmo book.
Yeah. So in this book right here, Cosmo basically, it's like she said before about looking for the treats in the book. So you actually have to put your glasses on, or eyesight if you're a little older. The third book that you had talks about different professions that dogs were in.
Yeah.
And when I went a quick read, you have a cancer scientist, which is the field you do professionally, an architect, a math teacher, an astronaut, an archaeologist, I believe a waste hauler and a trash collector, a farmer, a doctor, a waitress, a firefighter, which goes good in my household because my son's a firefighter, an engineer, a civil engineer, a journalist, and a pilot.
Yes.
And a waiter, I believe. And I was joking with you before we went on set that my dog Duncan would love to be a waiter because he has a very bad habit of getting up on the center island and taking some food off when he shouldn't be.
Yeah.
So what was the idea behind this book with all the professions?
Yeah. So this book I was trying to basically show that all of the jobs that we have in the community are important. So I grew up with a lot of doctors, and sometimes from doctors you get an impression that they think being a physician is the most important job, which it is. It's a very important job. But I wanted to show that all of the jobs that we have they all are very important in their own way. So that was where the inspiration for this book
And
came
you have
from.
different dogs in for different species of dogs in for each one.
The doctor is in there also, but I wanted to show that all of these different types of jobs, whether it's teacher or architect or trash collector, they're all important in their own way.
And just like you're absolutely correct. Just like with human beings, everything's important. So I want to thank Amulya Veldanda for stopping by Ion Piscataway to promote her books. I actually read this book right there when I was reading it out loud to Duncan at night, and I had all three of the labs sitting looking at me like I'm crazy or something. But thank you for stopping by, and I encourage everybody to get a hold of these books. And can you give yourself a plug where they can get a hold if they want to buy these books?
Yeah, of course. So the books are available on Amazon. They're also available on Barnes & Noble online.
So there you go.
Yep.
We got to make it in the top 10, and then make sure you have your kids do a review of the book once it's done.
That would
right?
be great.
Yeah, there you go.
Yes, thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and congratulations.
Thank you for having me, Mayor Waller.
You're welcome. I want to welcome everybody back for our second interview with our local author. Many of you folks may know this author here, who wore another hat for 22 plus years here in Piscataway Township as Councilman Steve Cahn. And in his amateur hours, so to speak, of wanting to be a top 10 writer, decided to do a baseball history book. And just by chance, it happened to be on a relative of his, Sid Gordon, who many longtime baseball aficionados know that was back in the 40s and 50s, what Sid played. And Steve, why don't you talk a little bit about why did you write the book? And that's normally like a major question that you always ask, why did you write the book? And what were the ups and downs of writing a book? Did you ever think you were going to get it finished? And then when you did get it finished, did you think that anybody was ever going to publish it? and take it away, Steve.
Well, first let me say, I've been on the show many times. It's great to be on as a citizen, as opposed to an elected official with the mayor. But those are actually very good questions. And I knew Sid Gordon when I was a young kid. He was a cousin, and I always wanted to know more. And I've probably had the idea of trying to write a book about his life and his career based on the little bit that I thought I knew for 20 years, but never really took the idea seriously. And frankly, it became like a COVID project. Not that I didn't have enough to do during COVID, but we really weren't working as hard or as many hours, and you weren't traveling for work. And so I got more involved in the research. His two sons were alive, and my parents, a lot of people had family records and information, which helped. And I quickly learned that writing a book about events that occurred 75 years ago was a lot harder than like being a lawyer or it was nothing I'd ever done before, to try and find history. And I really kind of learned it as I went. The internet, I don't know how anybody could have done research to write a history book before the internet, because now every newspaper ever written is available online. You could easily find books and articles and photographs and all sorts of things that there was no way you could find it before. Did I ever think I would finish it? I don't know. When I started, I thought, I hope I have enough to write 150, 200 pages.
Was there a cutoff on pages, like if you were to get this book published, that you spoke to a publisher and said, well, this is like the basic criteria that we need?
Well, there is a minimum amount of pages that they needed. They needed at least like 175 pages or so to make it a marketable book. And the editors did cut out important pieces. Not to get too off the track, there was an interesting part of the book talks about immigrants. It's really a history book. I mean, it's a biography of this player who was Jewish, but it's a history book of baseball's role in American society during the 40s and 50s, how baseball shaped society.
I mean, during the integration of professional sports.
It's a book about a Jewish player and the discrimination he faced, but also his friendship and teamwork with African-American players as they came into the league. And, he was very close friends with Jackie Robinson. He was very close friends with Gil Hodges. And they were involved in events that were beyond baseball. Much of this I only barely knew. But part of the book talks about immigrants. Now, immigrants coming to America used baseball as an opportunity to really assimilate and become part of American society. And I got into writing that, and it was like 1,000 pages unto itself. And so I had to really edit things back. And the editor said, that's terrific, but you got to get rid of all of that.
Well, it's interesting to talk about immigrants assimilating through professional sports. And that just didn't happen during the 40s and 50s. Think about Roberto Clemente.
Right.
Very famous Hispanic baseball player, and that around the time in the 60s and 70s, that's when, a lot of the Hispanic baseball players from Central and South America started being integrated into the league. And so it has been for a 50-year odyssey in professional sports, where folks from other countries are coming to play professional sports in the United States.
Right. Well, and there's a great Roberto Clemente story in the book. The first was Minnie Minoso, who came in, who was black but of Hispanic origin. He was one of the earlier players of color, and Gordon played against him as he was on the Indians, and they played against each other. And there's some really interesting stories about that. But to a quick Roberto Clemente story, Sid Gordon played the 1954, he's mostly on the Giants. He played for a number of years with the Boston Braves, but he played one season with the Pittsburgh Pirates. And the Pittsburgh Pirates general manager that year, 1954, was Branch Rickey, who had really integrated the game with Jackie Robinson earlier. So 1954, one of the reasons he traded for Gordon is he wanted somebody who had experience having played on integrated teams, and he had a lot. He had been involved in the integration of several clubs. So the Pirates integrated in 1954. In 55, they had a star right fielder come up as a rookie, which was Roberto Clemente. And Gordon played in the outfield with Clemente for part of the season before he was traded to the Giants. But the interesting story about discrimination involving Clemente is in the spring of 1955, spring training, they often play games around the South. And those stories in the book are fascinating about what happened. So the Pirates were playing a game against the Orioles in Birmingham, Alabama. And Birmingham had a strict ordinance that blacks and whites couldn't play together. So they would not let Roberto Clemente, who of course became one of the greatest,
on the same field,
play on the. He wasn't allowed to play in the game. So Gordon decided, I'm not playing. In protest, he sat the game out, and that's just one of the stories I didn't know anything about. Even his sons didn't know anything about, that I learned during the course of this research. And that's one of a number of examples of things he did off the field. And that's why this is it's a baseball book, but it's kind of a history book hidden in a baseball book. You know, it really tells the history of what went on and what some of these great players did that we only know a little bit about. And so that's how the book ended up being as involved of a project and kind of going from just a simple baseball book.
I have to ask a professional, because you're an attorney by trade. So after doing all this research, have you ever thought about going in the immigration end of law? Because I just, because you're reading all the stories that are going on, that were happening in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And a lot of it's still similar today when it comes to immigration.
Well, let me say, as a lawyer, I'm too old to learn something new. So I'm not going to go into immigration law. But I did work in a law firm, as you know, when I first came to Piscataway that did immigration law. I didn't do it.
Yeah. So you have some pictures here.
Right.
Maybe let's start out with the first picture. They're going to roll the first picture. All right. So describe this picture here that the viewers are seeing.
So I brought a handful of pictures to kind of help illustrate the story. This is a photo from their family scrapbook from 1946. One of the things that's fascinating about baseball is baseball has always been a game where they did these barnstorming tours and road trips. This is 1946. They put together,
after the war.
Right after the war, and they put together a baseball team to go down in Cuba. It's really a goodwill tour. It was really a lot of political overtones.
Obviously, for those people who don't know, this is pre-Castro.
It is pre-Castro. The Cubans loved baseball. The Cubans played integrated baseball. Blacks and whites, Cubans of blacks and white background played together, which we didn't do here in 1946, obviously. Here's a team of all-white major leaguers. Sid Gordon is in there in the front row, and they went to Cuba, played with black and white players mixed, and it was really part of a diplomacy package.
You know, that's funny, because when you see the movie, Jackie Robinson movie, a lot of the major league teams would go down to Cuba or some other Central American country and play, I guess, spring training down there before they went to Arizona or Florida.
Well, after experiencing the horrible situation in 46 and 7 with Jackie Robinson, in 48, the Dodgers went to the Dominican Republic to avoid some of the problems they had in Florida.
Yeah.
This is another great family photo, and there's no real history lesson behind it, but I love the photo because it's Bing Crosby and Sid Gordon in Los Angeles during spring training in 1949. Now, most people don't know Bing Crosby was a part owner of the Pirates.
Really? He's the part owner in professional baseball?
Of the Pirates. He was a part owner. How he got into that was that his buddy Bob Hope owned part of a team, and so he figured, I got to own one too. And he wrote a note on it. You can't read the note, but he wrote, "Dear Sid, have a great season except in Pittsburgh." So this is one of a whole bunch of photos that we have, both on the website we have and in the book of Gordon and Robinson together. They were named the New York City Athletes of the Year in 1948. Not just, they both had great baseball seasons, but they also were really involved in a lot of charity work.
Okay.
And There's a number of photos and stories in the book. They often went out and spoke together on brotherhood in sports. That was the topic. And they went to various different places and spoke. They were really became kind of somewhat of a team in that regard.
So this photo right here is 4 players.
Right. That's an interesting photo. That's not a family photo. I got to give credit to Getty Images because they own that photo. They sold me a license. That is obviously Sid Gordon is on the left. He's with the Braves then, and he's chatting with Jackie Robinson, and then the fellow looking over the back is another Brave. It's Willard Marshall. The guy on the right is Sam Jethro, and Sam Jethro was the first black player to play in the city of Boston. He played on the Braves in 1950. That was Gordon's first year with the Braves. There's just a lot of photos of Gordon and Robinson together. And I asked his son, Sam Jethro, somewhat a famous player, I asked him if, he knew Sid. I mean, if he knew Jethro and if his dad was close to him. And he said, Jethro was always at our house. And why was he always at our house? Well, he had a particular affinity for a housekeeper that was at their house. And so Sam Jethro was dating the housekeeper, so he was a regular at dinner at their house. So this is a family photo one. Again, one of the things that is fascinating is Jackie Robinson, who was one of the most famous athletes in the world. Sid Gordon was very well known in the United States and certainly in New York was a celebrity. These guys in the 1950s, blacks and whites didn't vacation together. These guys and their families went on vacation together. They went out for dinner together. The wives were friends. They were friends. That's Jackie Robinson, Sid Gordon, Jackie Robinson, Gordon's 2 sisters, my aunt sitting in the front row, and Rachel Robinson, who's 100 years old. She's still alive. At Sid Gordon's son's bar mitzvah in 1956. It was Gordon was retired, and Robinson, I think, that was his last season. This is a photo from. You may not recognize any of the folks in the photo, but that's Sid Gordon who's standing up. The player in the center is Whitey Ford.
Well, if you're a Yankee fan, you know Whitey Ford.
That was Whitey Ford in his rookie second season, I think, in baseball. And Gil Hodges. This is a photo. It's not the highest quality. It's from a newspaper article. In 1951, at the end of the baseball season, Gil Hodges, who played for the Dodgers, and they lost the World Series to the Yankees, actually, with Whitey Ford, played, and Roy Campanella, who's the black African-American catcher for the Dodgers, got a team of black major leaguers and white major leaguers, and they went on a barnstorming tour of the Deep South. Had never been done before. Whitey Ford and Sid Gordon were on that team, and the story of what happened in the fall of '51 and how these guys went to Richmond, to Nashville, to New Orleans, to Atlanta, and they played in places where there were rules in place. You couldn't do that, but they did it anyway. And that's in the book. And the history of how these players, and Gil Hodges is a real hero, went and led this tour is to me fascinating if you like American history.
So this looks like a poster here.
Right. This goes along with what we were saying. And a lot of the book, there's lots of parts of the book that talk about games and pitches and home runs because it's a baseball book. But a lot of this book is about history and what was going on and where baseball fit in to American society. This is 1949. By 1949, there were several African Americans in the league, not too many, several, and there was a lot of discrimination. And in '49, Gordon was the victim of a number of beanball attacks. He was thrown at it at an incredible rate. Even Joe DiMaggio, who's in this picture, when Italian Americans came here, they were horribly discriminated against. So Major League Baseball decided to get involved and have an anti-discrimination campaign. Gordon was part of it. This is 1949. It's a poster with Bob Feller, the great Hall of Famer for the Indians, Sid Gordon, Joe DiMaggio, Jackie Robinson, and the fellow with the microphone is Mel Allen, who was the Yankees announcer. It's an example of several different things baseball tried to do to change society and people's views of black players and Jewish players and even Italian players.
So it's a fair assessment to say if it wasn't for certain professional sports, you know, it had its foot in the door to change the racial inequality.
Yeah, baseball was America back then. You know, it still is to some degree, but baseball was really the sport. It was integrated with American society in a way that was, you know, baseball players were the biggest heroes.
So the ironic part is, you know, when Sid Gordon goes after WW2, 1946, Harry Truman had integrated the U.S. military.
Right.
And professional baseball sort of followed the same track of what the military was doing, but the rest of society wasn't.
That's very, very true. I was in the military, and the military has really kind of led the way. You know, it lagged behind for many years. It still lags behind in certain ways socially, but the military led the way in integration, and so did baseball. You know, people at home could see, you know, hey, you know, I love Roy Campanella. I'm a huge Jackie Robinson fan. You know, by the time we were kids, you know, when we played ball in the backyard, we wanted to be Willie Mays. We didn't even think or care that Willie Mays was African American. We just thought he was the greatest player.
Or Hank Aaron, or
but when we
Bob
were
Gibson, pitcher.
But when we were kids, the older generation still didn't quite think that way. So baseball has really always been a leader in the area of social change, and that is a large part of why I wrote the book. It's a large part of the message I was trying to get across. You know, did I do it well? You know, I'm not a professional writer, I'm just a guy from Piscataway, but
just like the Mrs. Rinaldi, who was on here before, you know, talking about her children's books, but. You know,
yeah, she was terrific.
I just want to mention to the folks in Piscataway, so if you really want to learn a little bit about baseball history, you know, this is stuff you don't necessarily see on the internet about the behind the scenes, what really went on. It's a good book, and I know my wife had bought a lot of books and, you know, gave it out as holiday presents this past holiday season. So
people seem to have an interest in it because people like history. People love baseball, and they blend together in an interesting way. So the book's a little different than a lot of other biographies you might read.
Well, I have to let you know, my wife did buy a book from my mother-in-law, who was an avid, diehard Yankee fan, and so I noticed when I had to stop and drop some groceries off that she's like 3/4 of the way through the book. So she's getting there.
I have a great photo in my office of from 1949, 3 All-Stars, Sid Gordon, Jackie Robinson, and Joe DiMaggio together.
Almost like the poster.
Yeah. Well, you know, and those guys were friends in a way. They probably still are today, but they all lived in the same. Jackie Robinson lived in the same neighborhood as Sid Gordon in Brooklyn. They all lived together. They all kind of socialized together. The wives socialized together. The kids socialized together. Sid Gordon's son, the older son, was 14 when he was done playing. He spent time in the clubhouse. He was given a jersey by Willie Mays, who was another player that you know Gordon played with, and one of his pals as a kid was Warren Spahn's son when Gordon played for the Braves, and I guess it's the same now. But, you know, the world is more complicated now. You know, in those days, baseball was everything.
Yep, that's true. So with that, I want to thank Steve Cahn, our Piscataway resident, who wrote a baseball history book called Sid Gordon. So go online and order the book and read it. And or if you want to do it on the cheap, I think it'll be the book possibly over to Piscataway Library.
I'm going to give a couple of books to the Piscataway Library, East Brunswick, and I'm going to go and talk at East Brunswick, and I'm going to give them a few books, and I hope to give out some books to some other libraries as well.
So when this coming baseball season, I know spring training's underway right now, so come April for opening day, best thing to do is go out and buy the Sid Gordon book.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Thank you.
So thanks for coming on Eye on Piscataway, Steve.
Thank you.
Piscataway Senior Citizen African American Club for sponsoring this event today for African History Month. It's a very rich program that's set up to be presented here today.
I cannot tell you how hard the Piscataway African American Senior Club works on the events for Black History in February. They go above and beyond to have innovative, creative events brought to all of you, and I just wanted to say thank you for your hard work.
And this is called royalty. So they are demonstrating their fashion, their royalty, their colors, their cultures, their friendship. Okay, this is the year of Black resistance. And let me just tell you a little bit about, when we talk about Black resistance, the theme. It explores how African Americans have resisted historic and ongoing oppression in all forms, especially the racial terrorism of lynching, unjust racial programs, and police killings.
Yes, Black resistance can lead to progress, but progress happens because of committed people. One may ask if and when slavery would have ever ended in America had the South won the Civil War. Slavery would have ended eventually through slave revolts with the evolution of time. This is what Dr. Martin Luther King addressed in his letter from a Birmingham jail on April 16, 1963. He said that people have a moral responsibility to break unjust laws and to take direct action rather than waiting potentially forever for justice to come through the courts.
Everybody's looking at me like, how dare I know the music? But I really just want to say thank you before everyone goes. And remember, we are your friends. You know, people look at us strangely and think that we are different, but we are just like you and love everybody we come in contact with. But we thank you for coming out to this Black History celebration. Okay.
Well, spring is around the corner, and you know, most people are tidying up their yards, but a lot of times folks are actually thinking what they want to do to their houses and or yards. And what happens, or what should happen, is that when you go to do major construction or addition or home renovations or appliances and things like that, you need to sit down and speak to the township officials. And then we're fortunate enough to have, for the March show, Dawn Corcoran-Gardella, our zoning officer here in town, and then also our construction official, Joe Hoff.
Good morning, Mayor.
I think it is, I know my wife and I, we're going to, at some point this year, we were going to be replacing, as we were talking on set, moving some things in here and there, and we'll be obviously coming in for permits. But I think maybe, Dawn, maybe before we have Joe jump in, maybe you might want to just talk about the mechanics on if somebody's thinking about doing certain projects in their house,
Sure.
what they need, what's their expectations and what they really need to do, not just because of Piscataway Township, but because it's law, state of New Jersey law. Okay, go.
Yeah, so first and foremost, anytime you're looking to do anything with your property, I always suggest just call the township, stop in, just see if a permit is required, because more often than not it is. So whether you're putting up just a shed or a fence, I mean, the zoning permit itself is a one-page application. All you have to do is attach a copy of your survey, and there's a fee for it. It's a $40 fee. But, you know, the ordinance, there's different requirements for different things, whether it be a shed or a fence. But again, anytime you are looking to do something, you do typically need a zoning permit for it before you put the structure up.
Now, when you say attach a copy of survey, is that if you're doing something on the exterior of the property or your house, or is that for even like if you're doing some kitchen work or remodeling something on the interior?
So for anything that is exterior, you certainly do need the property survey. We just want to make sure that what you're doing is in conformance with the code, and it allows us to see where you're putting, let's say, a fence or a shed, make sure that it meets the setback requirements, make sure the fence isn't over any type of easements. In terms of interior work, if you do have a copy of the survey, we ask that you give it to the municipality. If you don't, we will accept a letter if you're just doing like a bathroom renovation or moving a wall and so forth.
So that's pretty much, all right, so the process is they file the paperwork for a zoning permit. What happens after that?
Sure. So you file the paperwork for the zoning permit. We're going to review it to make sure that, again, what you're doing is conformance with the zoning ordinance. If it is, then we issue you the permit, and then you can start the work. We always say, once you hand in the permit, do not start the work until you have an approved permit in hand.
Yeah.
If it doesn't comply with the ordinance, you do have the option to pursue what's called a variance. That's when you would get, submit a separate application with our office, and then you would appear before the Zoning Board of Adjustment, and it's up to the board to decide whether or not they should allow for a deviation from the code.
Now, for instance, we had a couple of issues that came to attention of you where somebody in the past, how they installed an in-ground pool too close to the property line.
Right.
And they were looking to sell their house, and then that was picked up by the buyer's attorney that there's something was not correct.
Those are tricky, especially when you have an in-ground pool. So in that case, what the board typically would do if they were to give you the approval, in the event that the pool had to be replaced, you know, they would not be allowed to construct it back in the same location. They'd have to conform to the ordinance. We have a lot of issues with structures over easements. We see that time and time again where.
So there's all different types of easements. Some of it's drainage, some of it's utility easements, some is municipal for sewer.
Sure.
What is the significance and why we typically don't want structures on easements or over easements?
Sure. If the township ever has to go in and do work on that easement, now you have a structure that has to be dealt with. So whether, you know, if it's a shed over, you know, a sewer easement, if it needs to be repaired, I mean, it does really create a problem down the road. If you do have to pursue a variance for a structure over an easement, typically the board will require that in the event the township does have to go and do work, that it's, you know, the structure would have to be removed. Correct.
And there's also affidavits that are signed that are logged in with the deed restriction saying that if this is the case, it's the cost of the owner of the property.
Correct. There's a memorandum of restriction that the homeowner would have to sign, and then it gets recorded with the county. So that would run with the property. In the event the property changes title, the new owner would also be aware of that restriction.
And you know, a lot of times when first-time home buyers, they don't necessarily look at if there's restrictions on the property that were granted. It's actually the job of their legal counsel who's representing them to do that. And as Joe Hoff knows, a lot of times when people buy homes, they have a survey done, which is required by the state of New Jersey. They don't necessarily look at their survey when they receive it. It's only then when they're looking in their files to do some type of addition or something that they look for the survey, and they didn't realize that there was maybe some constrictions on pertaining to the survey.
That's true. They don't realize, or they just finally take a look at it for the first time, right? And sometimes they realize that the dwelling didn't even conform to the setback requirements, or whatever the case may be. So, but we certainly have seen a lot more people get a little bit more savvy over the years because they're aware of these things now.
So, and a lot of it has to do with the state laws that were prior to people purchasing. That a lot of people do home inspections. And/or their attorneys pick up any building permits that have been issued by the planning department and/or construction to see what's in conformance if there wasn't something done illegally. The biggest, I guess, lack of a better excuse, so to speak, when somebody goes to sell their house, they'll say, "Oh, this was here when I bought the house."
And sometimes it is, as Joe can certainly attest to. I mean, we do have, they are able to provide the original listing, believe it or not. But more times than not, right. It's sort of
that there was some work done and it never went through your office or Joe's office right there. Joe, having you jump in now, what is the significance of that and why they need to really pull it? Because not just as a code issue, but more or less a safety issue.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. So that the state building code, we're coming on 25 years. It was enacted back in 1974 under Governor Byrne. All 21 counties, we all use the same book. And it's a pretty flexible building code, and we liked giving building permits. But the problem is, a lot of people skip that part of getting building permits. And then I have to give them a fine. The state law that I referred to requires when I find work, or it comes to my attention that work was done without a permit, I have to give a fine first. And then we get to the permit process. So right away, we're doubling the time involved. The trick is to come in first and get the permit. Now, many people, and we hear this daily, tell me, I bought the house this way. Now, if everyone bought the house this way, anyway, the point being, I need some evidence that you bought this house that way. So we use the multiple listing. When you bought the house, if you had a multiple listing, and it showed that you had a pool in the backyard and a deck, or you had a finished basement, we'll skip the fine on those three things and go right to applying for the permit. But if you can't come up with that, unfortunately, I have to give you a fine. That's what the state law requires, and the fines are typically $2,000 for working without a permit. So that's where we start. That's where the discussion starts. It's always better if a homeowner, if you're a prospective homeowner, has your attorney check with the town for a permit record to see what permits were taken. Your home inspector can do the same thing. But a good attorney will definitely check to see if that pool or that deck or that finished basement or that conversion of a garage, which we see a lot of.
Is illegal.
That is illegal.
And we see a lot of them. And unfortunately, the typical rejoinder is, well, I bought the house this way. I said, well, unfortunately, that doesn't get us past go. First, you have to pay a $2,000 penalty for creating a garage space into a habitable space, which is dangerous.
Well, let me jump into that thing. When a resident may say that, or a property owner, I bought it, especially within the last 10 or 15 years when the laws have been pretty crystal clear, like people before they do the closing on a house or their domicile, wherever they're going to live, is that they're picking up anything that was not filed. So for somebody now in the year 2023 to say, well, it was that way, it's a good bet that it wasn't, because it's being picked up.
Right. And unfortunately, as Joe was saying, if you would just get the permit from the get-go, it wouldn't delay the closing either. A lot of times we see homeowners are trying to, close in a week or two, and it's impossible because now you may have to go for the variance, or, you may have to make changes or modifications to comply with Joe's code and so forth. So we also see that side of it as well.
All right, so let's delve back into the safety aspect, Joe. You're about especially illegal conversions of garages and things like that from one. What is the significance of that? I mean, all right, so I converted the thing right there. So what?
Well, right off the bat, that means you have a legal electric in there. That means the electric that was done wasn't necessarily done by a licensed electrician. So, so you're risking the safety of yourself and your family by not employing a licensed professional. We have hundreds of crack licensed electricians in Central Jersey. Just pick up the phone book, get free prices, and they'll file the permit for you. And you know, now you know that's done. You can sleep well. We had a terrible fire, I think, Mayor, just night before last.
Yes,
and I mean, the whole place is shot too.
Illegal housing.
Illegal housing. So a garage conversion. There's no. Second thing that we find in a garage, there's no egress window. So many times people will convert a garage or buy a house that had a converted garage and it's used as a bedroom, but there's no fire escape out of it. So, you know, now there's a double risk.
Basements too, that becomes a really big issue.
The basements, if I could talk just a minute on basements, bedrooms and basements are a no-no. No. There are a few examples in the code where you can convert a room in your basement to a bedroom. But it requires work. You have to hire a contractor or to know
architect
or to build a little window well that meets a certain dimension so that you can a fireman can get in that well or you can get out of that basement. That would be legal, and we're happy to give you a permit for that. You have to sketch out a little drawing. You file a building permit, and we look at the drawing. If it's reasonable, we're happy to give you a permit. If not, we suggest you go speak with a professional. Sometimes people hire architects. They're a great source because they do this every day for a living.
So. One of the things that we're picking up around town is these illegal conversions going on in garage. I remember there's one side on the north side of town, some woman was living in a garage with an electrical cord that the owner of the property was charging her like $400 or $500 a month to live in. They were using I guess a 16-gauge electrical cord to supply heat out there.
Very, very dangerous.
It's scary.
Yeah.
Mayor, if I could, Dawn, just let me say this before I forget. There's going to be people that are not going to get permits.
Yeah.
Well, in this day and age, you're going to get caught. Yeah. When you go to sell the house or if you go to rent the house, you need to register it with the town, and you're going to get caught, and then you're going to pay a $2,000 fine, and then you're still getting the permit. It's much, much easier to call us. Call the building department. We have a full, very friendly staff. Recently, there's been some reforms in the building code, relief for homeowners. Such a few things, the laws have changed, so you no longer need permits for a lot of things. Changing your toilet, changing your roof, changing your aluminum siding, changing your doors, changing your windows, provided it's just similar double hung for double hung. So there's a lot of things that don't need permits, but I think some people are intimidated by the process of we need to get a permit. We're in the permit giving business. We want to give you a permit. We issued 3,500 permits last year.
Which was a record.
Actually, it was a record for Piscataway, in my 29 years. Well, I know it was a record because, we were very busy. The economy, of course, was hot with the low interest rates. And, we did $160 million in construction costs last year. Yeah. And so Piscataway's busy, but the building department, as well as I'll speak for Dawn, the community development, we're fully staffed and the phones are open. And
all right, so what are Dawn, to get back, what are most of the common questions you might get from residents? Like people just coming in.
Sure. Aside from, do I need a permit?
Yeah.
Then it's sort of, obviously, then it's like, oh, I need a zoning permit. Do I need a building permit? But we typically deal, if we're not dealing with Joe's department, zoning, we're always issuing permits for fences, the sheds. Start getting questions about pools, what height, what setbacks.
Generators.
Generators were big, yes.
Like for instance, when I did some work in my backyard, I pulled permits
for a generator.
For a generator, even though I don't have a generator, but to run the conduit lines.
For the electric.
For the electric and the transfer switch. So if I were to ever install it, they're going to find something on file that an inspector came out and inspect that it was installed correctly underground and stubbed out.
Sure. Otherwise, you end up tearing the whole thing out and starting from scratch. Right. A point I'd like to make, Mayor, is that Dawn and I work like hand in hand. We're like Abbott and Costello here, or Mutt and Jeff, with zoning permit, building permit. The zoning permit is the precursor to the building permit. You can't get a building permit in most cases unless you have a zoning permit first, and the fee is only $40, and it gives Dawn a chance to make sure everything
complies with the ordinance.
So what happens if the permit is rejected?
If the permit is rejected, then the process stops, meaning it's not going to continue on to Joe. It'll just, again, they have the option to either modify the plan. Sometimes you're able to—
Which you got to refile.
Correct, yes. Yeah. You have to resubmit the zoning permit. Or again, you can go for the variance. Typically, I mean, we always write on the bottom of the permit why it's being rejected, basically what the options are. And more times than not, people will come in and they ask, and we'll go through if they go to pursue the variance, we'll sit with you, go through the process. It seems intimidating, but at the end, like, people will come back and say, that wasn't so bad. Or we've had people come in for variances for 2-3 times because they keep changing the agenda. But, you know, again, it's not the zoning permit, $40 fee. It's a pretty easy process. In terms of review time, zoning, we only get 10 days to review it. Joe, you're like—
Our building permit, once it's approved by, once we have an approved zoning permit, we have 20, the state tells me I have to issue that permit within 20 business days or tell you why in a denial. So we try to comply and keep under that 20 days. And to that point, we're doing a lot of COVID, had us all learn new tricks. So we're doing a lot of electronic submissions for things that don't necessarily need seals, electronic seals on them. So you could theoretically submit a permit for a deck online or a finished basement online, or and we have a drop box right outside the office. So if you're getting home late from work, you can just try to put your name on there. And your cell and who it's going to, building department, and just get yourself a nice little brown envelope, throw it in the box with $40, and leave your number, and we'll go through it in the morning. And if there's any missing documentation, we'll give you a call. So we try to keep that part easy. Another innovation in Piscataway Township, and we're a little ahead of curve in the state on this one, Mayor, is with your assistance, we were able to activate the portal. We call it the portal. It's the Spatial Data Logic is our software company, that we use to process the permits, to schedule inspections, to record results, to issue certificates. But the homeowners, contractors are now allowed to go online, create an account just like you'd create a Craigslist account or a WhatsApp or whatever. You create yourself a little account, and then you can schedule your inspections online. You don't have to call. Sometimes the phones are busy.
That's great.
And you can put in 3 dates. You say, can you come in Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday? And then we'll get back to you, and we'll say, yeah, we can do Tuesday.
How do they get the response back, Joe?
Electronically.
Nice.
Through email, yeah.
So a lot of the private contractors appreciate, obviously.
The solar companies love it because they're called all day long. Can you give me the status on my permit, or what that, you know, the solar companies are very interested in getting that certificate because they want to, the minute they get it, they can file it with the government.
Well, it's kind of funny that you said solar companies because with the installation of a lot of solar, with some tax credits petering out, they're always in a rush to get under the deadline.
Yeah, they're always in a hurry to. So they love the portal because can you give me the status of that? You can also go on the portal, by the way, and see the status of the review of your permit. So now you know if I told you we try to keep it under 20 business days. So you might say, well, it went through the fire inspector, it went through the building inspector. It's awaiting the plumbing subcode officials review, and then it goes to processing. So Yeah, you can see, now, you can check the status.
You talk about permits and stuff. One of the big, I guess, problems that we have out there, people get their permits, then they don't call for an inspection.
That's true.
Yeah.
I mean, you're like 75%, 80% there.
That is true.
Yeah.
In order to close it out. And that's one of the other big things is Dawn Corcoran knows is that, when they go to sell a house property, right. They file for a permit, but it was never closed out. And then next thing you know, you have the real estate agent calling up, we need to get this inspected right away, or the closing's tomorrow. And
yeah, we call them cleanups. And that's a science in itself to just get people over the finish line. I had a poor fellow call me last night at 5 o'clock. He said, I paid Home Depot. It could have been Lowe's. It was a big box store.
Yeah.
For a furnace. They told me they called the town to get an inspection, but haven't heard back, and I'm waiting 3 weeks. That seems like an awful long time. Wow. Can you give me some status?
Yeah.
So we looked in the file and said, yes, Home Depot applied for the permit on his behalf. We called them, shows a record that we called them to come in and pay, but they never paid.
So in other words, they never paid for the fee, so thus they didn't have the permit.
So I called the homeowner back and I said, unfortunately, you don't have a permit.
Yeah.
So now call your contractor and ask him to furnish you the permit number, because that's essentially a receipt.
Yeah.
So he was a little upset with the big box store.
Yeah.
So I guess the moral of the story is hire a local plumber, and you'll be better off.
Yeah. Well, I think this is, I know, and then there's a constant lot of Open Public Records Act requests that the attorneys have to look through and then ultimately end up down in your departments right there. And this is for the protection of the homeowner.
No doubt.
Or this prospective buyer.
Right.
Because it's not about the current people, it's about the people who are eventually going to buy the property or the structure where they're going to reside in, to make sure that all the proper inspections were taking place on whatever renovations or additions or whatever were done.
Sure.
So you have at least some peace of mind that there was a third-party inspector that took place.
Yeah, when there's an open permit, you're essentially buying a pig in a poke, so to speak.
Yeah.
You don't know what you're buying because it may never have had a final inspection. Once you get that final inspection, you're entitled to a suitable for framing nice certificate from the state of New Jersey that says, this structure or this work satisfies the minimum code standards and is legal.
Like for instance, prior, right before COVID, we replaced where our pool is. We replaced our walk area with pavers. We dug everything up, and we decided, well, we're going to replace everything around there to give the pool new life. And there's the ground wire that goes around the pool.
The bonding and the grounding for pools.
And that had the pool electrical permit, and it had to be before it got backfilled. They had to make sure that was all attached because nobody wants to get electrocuted.
Yeah, water and electric don't mix.
No.
And
that's all the more reason.
Yeah.
I'm pleading with people, if you're going to do anything with water like that, you need to get permits.
And if you're thinking about a pool permit, think about a licensed electrician.
Yeah.
A homeowner can do it, but a homeowner with some knowledge of electrical is allowed. A homeowner is allowed to do it, but the pool electric portion is complicated. It gets more every year. It gets more complicated. So do yourself a favor, consult with a licensed electrician before you.
And that's even if you want to install a jacuzzi or a sauna or a hot tub.
Above ground pool, an in-ground pool, a jacuzzi, a hot tub. Water and electric do not mix.
Yeah, you want to make sure it's done correctly the first time because you don't want that liability if something was not installed correctly.
It's safety first, and that's really what we're talking about here.
Or you don't want to have a situation where somebody had renovated their whole house on the inside, converted their downstairs basement into living quarters, and next thing you know, they have drywall up and no inspections, and next thing you know, the people come to buy the house, and they said, well, they put it over because there's no permits down there, and then what happens there, Joe?
Well, Typically, we like to tear everything out because people start saying, first, let's get past the I bought it this way. It doesn't matter that you bought it this way. The penalty it's not personal. It's not on you, the homeowner. It's on the structure. So the structure has to get the penalty. So first we get the penalty. The next thing is we get a plan. And sometimes people show me plans and say, these, what appear to me to be clearly bedrooms, are not bedrooms. They're yoga rooms or storage rooms and then we get into a little horse trading. We take every other wall down and we take all the closets out, and then you want to relabel it as a storage room. We kind of try to be a little reasonable there, but you're not going to leave, and I see them once a week, once every 2 weeks. It's probably more reasonable. Somebody will have 2 or 3 bedrooms that they were renting an illegal apartment out of. We'll find kitchens.
I mean, we had an issue up on Golf Links where somebody converted a new house and they had 14 university students there, and then they had a coin-operated laundromat in the basement.
It's a little hard to deny.
With Rutgers being right here in town, there's tremendous pressure, as we all know, on our housing stock to get a little pin money, if you will, by renting out the basement or converting a garage, and but it's not legal, it's not safe.
But we don't want a fire like happened just recently within the last 48 hours. A situation like that.
Could have been much worse.
It could have been a fatality if somebody was in there maybe taking a couple sleeping pills and didn't hear the alarm. It could be bad.
It could be very bad.
Good.
So the moral of the story is when you go to do renovations to your house, take out the permits and make sure that the building department does the inspections or whatever, electrical, fire, plumbing, or whatever, because it's in your interest for safety reasons and for comfort right there. And that's why I told Dawn I'll come visiting sometime over the summer to get some permits.
And we like to think, Mayor, that it's been reported that we were voted 3 out of the last 4 years in an informal home news, Evening News Tribune poll. The Community Development Department, which includes the zoning department and our building department, was voted best in customer service in Central Jersey. So we like working with the residents of Piscataway. We enjoy our job, and
you want to make sure they're safe.
And we want to make sure they're safe. Yes.
So with that, I want to thank Dawn, Corcoran-Gardella, and our zoning officer and the community development, as well as Joe Hoff, our construction official here in town. Please work with them because they want to work with you. When you go to do something, they don't want to have to spot something on the street. Next thing you know, you're getting fines. It's the last thing you want. They want to make sure you do it the first time correctly. And with that, I want to thank both of them for coming on the show. And it's just by dumb luck that both of you are Irish descent.
Yes, happy St. Patrick's Day.
I have my St. Patrick's Day tie on.
Yes, we got 40 days till Easter.
And we're going to actually close out the show with our good friend Dominic Mantuano, who's going to sing the rendition of Danny Boy to close out the show. So,
very nice.
So we're going to go to the videotape. Take it away, Dominic.
Oh, Danny boy, the pipes are calling from glen to glen and down the mountainside. The summer's gone and all the roses dying. It's you must go and I must bide. But call me back when summer's in the meadow, or when the valleys nights I'll be here in sunshine or in shadow. Oh, Danny boy, oh, Danny boy, I love you so. But when ye come and all the flowers are falling, if I am dead, as dead I well may be, you'll come and find the place where I am lying, and kneel and say, and Ave there for me, and I shall hear the soft you tread above me, and all my grave will water sweeter be, for you will pen and tell me that you love me, and I shall sleep in peace until you come.